More than 2,000 years ago, a small city stood on the banks of the Tiber River. It had no great wealth, no powerful army, and nothing that suggested it would one day change the world. Yet over the centuries, that small settlement grew into one of the greatest empires in history, ruling millions of people across 3 continents, building roads that still exist today, and creating laws that continue to shape the modern world. But how did one ordinary city rise to such extraordinary power, and why did an empire that seemed unstoppable eventually fall? This is the story of Rome, the empire that changed history. But no great empire is born by chance. Long before Rome became famous, its destiny was already being shaped by the land beneath its feet. The city stood beside the Tiber River, which provided fresh water while carrying merchants, travelers, and ideas from distant lands. Just beyond the river lay the Mediterranean Sea, opening the door to trade with civilizations across the ancient world. Yet Rome was not built directly on the coast. Instead, it stood far enough inland to remain protected from pirate raids and enemy fleets. Nature had given Rome an extraordinary advantage. 7 hills surrounded the settlement, making it easier to defend and far more difficult to conquer. Forests and mountains protected the north, while fertile plains to the south produced enough food to support a rapidly growing population. As trade expanded, cultures mixed, knowledge spread, and the settlement became richer, stronger, and more connected with every passing generation. Without realizing it, the people of Rome had chosen one of the most strategic locations in the ancient world. Sometimes history does not begin with a great king or a mighty army. Sometimes, it begins with the perfect place. Every great empire has a beginning, and Rome's began with a legend. According to ancient tradition, twin brothers Romulus and Remus were abandoned as infants and left to die. But fate had other plans. A she-wolf found them, protected them, and kept them alive. Years later, the brothers returned to build a new city, but their shared dream ended in tragedy when Romulus killed Remus. In 753 BC, he founded a city that would bear his name. Rome was born. Yet Rome's true strength was never the legend itself. It was its location. Built on the banks of the Tiber River, it was close enough to the sea for trade, yet far enough inland to remain protected from attack. Before long, merchants, soldiers, and cultures crossed paths there, turning a small settlement into the perfect foundation for something far greater. Rome had been born, but becoming a city was only the beginning. In its earliest years, Rome was ruled by kings, and with every generation the small settlement continued to grow. Wooden huts gradually gave way to stronger homes, simple paths became busy streets, and modest marketplaces evolved into lively centers where merchants from across Italy exchanged goods, ideas, and traditions. As more families settled along the Tiber River, the surrounding fields were cultivated, trade expanded, and the population steadily increased. With that growth came greater influence, as neighboring villages were gradually absorbed into Rome and new alliances strengthened its position across central Italy. Every challenge made the Romans stronger. They learned how to organize their society, how to build lasting infrastructure, and, above all, how to adapt to a changing world. Over the course of these early centuries, Rome was transformed from a small riverside settlement into one of the most powerful cities in central Italy. But as Rome grew stronger, its people began to ask a question that would shape the future of their civilization. Should the fate of an entire city remain in the hands of a single king? The answer would change history forever. Rome was no longer just a small city. With every passing year, it grew stronger, expanded its borders, and began to shape the world around it. But Rome's greatest strength was never its wealth or even its army. It was the way the city was governed. In 509 BC, the Romans overthrew their last king and founded the Republic, replacing the rule of one man with a system shared between elected leaders, the Senate and the people. It was far from perfect, but it gave Rome something many of its rivals could never achieve: stability. As the Republic grew, so did its army. Roman soldiers trained relentlessly, fought with unmatched discipline, and moved as a single force on the battlefield. Every victory expanded Rome's influence. Every conquest brought new lands, new wealth, and new allies. Rome was no longer fighting simply to survive. It was preparing to build an empire. Rome's victories did more than expand its borders. They transformed a small republic into one of the fastest rising powers of the ancient world. With every new territory, Rome's influence spread farther, its trade grew stronger, and its people became increasingly prosperous. Roads stretched across the Italian peninsula, connecting cities, farms, military camps, and distant communities more efficiently than ever before. Each conquest brought valuable resources, loyal allies, and new responsibilities, turning the Republic into something far greater than its founders had ever imagined. But success came with a price. As Rome became richer and more powerful, it also attracted the attention of other great civilizations. Across the Mediterranean stood another empire, one just as wealthy, just as ambitious, and equally determined to control the sea that connected the ancient world. Its name was Carthage. Rome was no longer just a powerful state. It was becoming an empire. Every victory pushed its borders farther, and every conquest brought new opportunities. Its first great rival was Carthage. For years, the two powers fought for control of the Mediterranean, until the Carthaginian general Hannibal stunned the world by leading his army across the Alps. It was one of the boldest military campaigns in history. But Rome refused to fall. It learned from every defeat, adapted to every challenge, and came back stronger each time. In the end, Carthage was defeated, and Rome emerged as the dominant power of the Mediterranean. Yet this was only the beginning. As Roman legions marched across new lands, another legendary figure rose to power: Julius Caesar. A fearless commander and brilliant strategist, Caesar conquered Gaul and expanded Rome farther than ever before. His victories turned him into the most powerful man in Rome. But power often comes at a price. Many senators feared that Caesar had become too powerful. In 44 BC, he was assassinated inside the Senate house, stabbed 23 times by men he once trusted. His death did not save the Republic. Instead, it pushed Rome into years of civil war and changed the course of its history forever. Caesar was dead, but his death solved nothing. Instead, it pushed Rome into one of the darkest periods in its history. The Republic that had ruled for centuries began to tear itself apart as friends became enemies, powerful generals turned their armies against one another, and the streets of Rome filled with fear and uncertainty. Across the Republic, loyalty was no longer given to the Senate. It belonged to ambitious men who were willing to fight for absolute power. Years of civil war followed, and every victory came at the cost of another Roman life. Rome was no longer fighting foreign enemies. It was fighting itself. When the conflict finally came to an end, only one man remained. A young leader named Octavian. The future of Rome now rested in his hands. After Caesar's death, Rome descended into years of civil war. The republic that had once made Rome so powerful was beginning to collapse. After a long and bitter struggle, Caesar's adopted son, Octavian, emerged victorious. In 27 BC, the Senate gave him a new title, Augustus. It was more than a new name. It marked the birth of the Roman Empire. Under Augustus, Rome entered the greatest chapter of its history, a time that would later become known as the Pax Romana. For nearly 2 centuries, peace and stability allowed the empire to flourish. New cities rose across its vast territories, thousands of kilometers of roads connected distant provinces, and magnificent aqueducts, bridges, and temples transformed the landscape. In the generations that followed, iconic landmarks such as the Colosseum came to symbolize Rome's greatness. Trade flourished, knowledge spread, and people from countless cultures lived under the same empire. Rome was no longer remembered only for the wars it had won. It had become a civilization whose laws, engineering, architecture, and ideas would shape the world for centuries to come. But even at the height of its glory, one truth remained unchanged. No empire lasts forever. Rome had reached the height of its power. Its borders stretched across 3 continents, nearly 70 million people lived under its rule, and its roads connected thousands of kilometers of land. Its ships sailed across the Mediterranean, its laws governed millions, and its engineers built monuments that seemed almost impossible for the ancient world. Its soldiers defended an empire unlike anything history had ever seen, while its cities continued to grow, its wealth kept increasing, and its influence reached farther with every passing generation. To those who lived in that era, Rome seemed eternal. No rival appeared strong enough to challenge it, and no enemy looked capable of bringing such a vast empire to its knees. Yet history has a way of surprising even the greatest civilizations. Empires rarely fall because of a single battle. More often, they weaken slowly, one generation at a time. For centuries, Rome had stood as the most powerful empire in the known world. It seemed unstoppable. But history has shown that no empire lasts forever. As Rome grew larger, it became harder to govern. Its economy weakened, political instability spread, and emperors came and went with alarming speed. The empire that had conquered the world was slowly beginning to collapse from within. At the same time, new enemies gathered beyond its borders. The Goths, the Vandals, and other barbarian tribes pressed deeper into Roman territory, while the legions that had once marched across continents were now fighting to defend their own homeland. In AD 410, Rome was sacked for the first time in nearly 800 years. It was more than the fall of a city. It was the moment the myth of Rome's invincibility was finally broken. 66 years later, in AD 476, the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, Romulus Augustus, was forced from the throne. The empire that had dominated the Mediterranean for centuries had come to an end. But Rome itself was far from finished. The Western Roman Empire had fallen. Its emperors were gone, its legions had disappeared, and to many people it seemed that Rome's story had finally come to an end. But history tells a very different story, because Rome never truly disappeared. The empire itself was gone, yet its ideas continued to shape the world for centuries to come. Roman law became the foundation of legal systems that still protect millions of people today, while the principles of the Republic, citizenship, and even the Senate survived long after the empire had fallen. The roads built by Roman engineers continued to connect cities and civilizations, its bridges remained standing, its aqueducts carried water for generations, and its architecture inspired people who had never even seen the city of Rome. Even Latin never truly disappeared. Over the centuries it evolved into Italian, Spanish, French, Portuguese, Romanian, and influenced countless other languages spoken around the world. Rome did not conquer the world with its armies alone. It conquered the world with its ideas. Perhaps that was Rome's greatest victory. Not the wars it won, but the legacy it left behind. Because Rome disappeared. Yet the world never stopped being shaped by Rome. That is why Rome was never just a great empire. It was a civilization that changed the course of human history forever. If this story changed the way you see the world, even a little, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that shape the world. Because sometimes, the best way to understand the future, is to learn from the past. NEXORA. See beyond.